Good morning students. Once again I welcome you all to my video. This is the video of class 10 subject biology. So as we had in the as we had seen in the previous video that we had completed the sexual reproduction part. That means we haven't completed fully, but we have completed half. That means we had seen the parts of the flower, the male part as well as the female part. So today we will start the pollination part. As I had told you all that I will start the pollination part in the next video. So pollination. So if I want to define the pollination, what will be the simple definition? The simple definition of the pollination will be the transfer of pollen grain from the anther. From this anther, we can see here also, from the anther to the stigma. So the transfer of pollen grain from the anther to the stigma is known as pollination. This is the simple definition. Transfer of pollen grain from anther to the stigma is known as pollination. Now pollination may be of two type. It is of two type. First one is the self pollination and second one is the cross pollination. Now what is self pollination, what is cross pollination? So let's start with the self pollination. So in this one, in the first diagram, I would like to tell you about the self pollination. Let me zoom in this one. Now if the pollination will occur in the same flower, so that will be the same self pollination. For example, this is the anther. Now it is having the pollen grains. Now if the pollen grain is just transferred to the stigma of the same plant, so this is known as the self pollination. But in the case of cross pollination, we can see here that the transfer of pollen grain from, that means from one plant to, from one flower to the other flower, just like this is the number one flower, this is the second flower. So if this that means if this pollen grains is just migrating over here, so this is called the cross pollination. Now that means the cross pollination exact answer, that means answer of the cross pollination is the transfer of the pollen grain from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the other flower of the different plant is known as the cross pollination. Now how that means the pollen grain will just jump from this flower to this flower, maybe this is having a distance or something. So how they can transfer, how they can be transferred? So they are being transferred by the agents. So what are the agents that the pollination can occur? First agent is the wind. So by the help of the wind, the pollen grain can be transferred to the stigma of the other plant. Second one is the insect. You can see in the diagram also that if a honeybee is just sitting over here, sitting in this one for the nectar, so when they will sit for the nectar, that means in the legs or in their body the pollen grain will stick. So again the same bee, if the same insect, if they will sit over here, so what will happen? That means in the stigma the pollen grain will fall and they will just move down for the fertilization. So here the next topic is the fertilization. So from here also I can show you, but just I'm showing in this diagram. So here just I will discuss a little bit. So when the pollen grain is sticked over here, they are making a tube over here. So from that tube, that pollen grain is just entered into the ovary part. So in the ovary part there is a ovule present, that means the egg cell. Now the egg cell and the pollen grain, they will just fuse together to make zygote. So the further I am showing over here, see, the anther part is having the pollen grain. Now pollen grain will stick on the stigma part. Now from the stigma they will enter in the ovule part. So in the ovule part there is a female egg, that means female sex cell. So from that means over there they will produce the zygote. This is the process of fertilization. Fertilization means the fusion of the male and the female gamete. Now here, now the zygote fully finally develops into the embryo. Now what is the embryo? So we don't have the structure of the embryo. So embryo is the, that means the stage after the zygote is that embryo. That means we can say a fully developed zygote is known as the embryo. So it is not converted into plant, but it is a embryo, the developed part. Now here, when the embryo develops, after the development of the embryo, they just produces some of the things that is known as the cotyledon, endosperm, and a single embryo, and the seed is just protected by the fruit. Now what is this one? Now a lot of plant just produces single seed, and lot of plants are there that they just produce the double seed. Now what is this double seed? What is this single seed? Now this part, the main this part is known as cotyledon. Now if the cotyledon is single, this if it is single, then it is called monocot. If it is double, then it is called dicot. Now the baby that means the part of the baby plant that grow into shoot, that is called the plumule, and the lower part of the flower, that means part that grow it into the root, that is called the radicle. So two parts are there, the plumule and the radicle. So and after that, that means the roots will grow downside, and the body part they will just move to the upside, and further they will grow. And they also need some favorable condition for the germination, that they need the water, availability of water must be there, they need the air, they need the warm, so they can germinate in a very good condition. So this is the completion of our that means the flowering part. The all thing is finished. Now in the next video we are going to start with the sexual reproduction in human being. So have a nice day.